Hello and welcome back to episode 14 of the Lich Please podcast. Almost at episode 13 there. I'm here, as always, with Alex. And today we have a TikTok creator with us. Encountersmith we'll be chatting D&D again. And we'll get right into it. So what was your introduction to D&D? Like, how far does it go back? What was your first system?
Sure. Well, first of all,
first
thanks for having me.
iteration?
This is fun. I can talk D&D for ages. I think my first iteration, I think in high school, which for me was 2008-ish, not to date myself too much. I think I started with 3.5, like briefly, just kind of not knowing anything. And that didn't last very long. You know, like first group, no one knows how they're playing. That group falls apart. Fast forward, like probably I've been playing 5th edition for like probably the past 7 years, and the idea, 7 years, sorry. It was a work thing, you know, like someone was like, I think nowadays everyone gets into D&D through like Critical Role and all that jazz. A friend of mine, I work in entertainment, and one of our costumers was just getting into the Adventure Zone, which is more unique for someone's first like iteration into it. And she like brought the book to work. She was like, "You all are gonna learn this and play this with me." And I was like, "All right, cool, whatever." You know, I've dabbled. And she made her boyfriend DM, who didn't want to do it. And great guy, super smart guy.
Yeah.
He sucked at it. And I was like, you know what? I'll try it. Let me do it. And that's kind of what. It's just been doing that for the past 7 years with different groups of people.
Yeah. That's one of the more like normal stories we've had of how people get into D&D. Yeah.
I think that's becoming more common though. Is people just being like, you know what? I'll give DMing a go, and then just doing it for
right. And you know, like I think out of the
time.
group, I was like, you know, into RPGs and stuff like that, and like, you know, I went through my rules lawyer phase. So like when he started getting everything, like I was like, oh, I'm gonna learn how to play. And when he started getting everything wrong, I was like, stop, I'll do it.
Yeah. That's nice. Did you start on a module? Or
we
did you
started
start on
with
a
a
homebrew?
module, and then when I picked it up, I tried to continue the module, and we finished it out with like half of the original group remaining, because I think the other big common thing with people just starting is like, hey, let's all try to play D&D together, all 9 of us. And like that gets overwhelming and too much for people, and no one knows how to rebalance modules who's made for 4 players to 9 players. So once we wrapped up that, I think we ended up doing Horde of the Dragon Queen. I think that was like my first like complete like adventure that I finished.
Oh, right.
Oh, nice.
Not a great adventure, like structure wise, but we made it work and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Horde of the Dragon Queen, I think, was the first one I tried running with my group of friends. And I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but they got to that first village with the cult dragon attacking the blue dragon, walked in, did one remaining count, went, oh, why do we care about these people? Turned around and left, and I was like,
you're
no!
on a carriage safe away from the city, and you're like, oh, I guess we should go do something about that, or not. You know, there's no motivation for your players to go do that. So bless my players' heart for like running into the fire and starting that.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I'm sure I experienced that module at some point. That actually brings us perfectly into the question of modules or homebrew. What do you prefer?
That's such a good question, and I think my opinion on that has changed so much. Like, so Horde of the Dragon Queen was like the first module, maybe like only one out of like 2 or 3 modules I've ever like completed front to back. And it ended in the most unsatisfying way. So like when I ended it, I was like, I'm only doing homebrew. Like module stuff doesn't work. It doesn't understand my players. You can't tailor it to your players. So I was strictly homebrew from that. And then after doing years of homebrew, I was like, man, this is a lot of work. So I've recently started playing with modules again, just like so it's easier for me to run games while like making content and working my day job and stuff. And this might be a cop-out answer, but I really think the perfect way is to blend the two, is to like start with your module, allow your players to like gain those experiences together, and then from there start exploring their individual backstories and see how they can weave and completely change the module.
I think in a way there's almost a misconception that some people have that modules are easy to run. And if you're starting out as a DM, modules are easy to do what you should be doing. Modules are hard because if they go off pace at one point and you change something, that could mess something up further down the line. And if you're a new DM, that can be really stressful and really freak you out. So yeah, I think experienced DMs have a much better time running modules because you know the degree of which you can change things, and even that improv aspect down the line where you're like, I changed this, I can easily.
And I think because a module's structured in a certain way, you're too scared at the beginning to change things. Like you're like, this would be really cool if the module's structured like this because my player's doing this, but I'm too worried to like play along with that because I'm worried that something down the line will get ruined because of it. So it's like really being able to let go and be like, cool. Like we're running Ascent into Avernus, because I think a lot of people are because of Baldur's Gate, and like we are not even to Avernus yet, and the book is like a loose guideline at this point, you know. And it's just like having like the like, okay, if my players don't do what the book wants them to do, I'll just figure it out, and then I can just go back to the book from reference to make sure I'm like generally going in a direction that this thing wants me to go in.
Yeah, that's definitely the way to do a module and not take it like a Bible and read it verbatim because nobody wants that.
Yeah, definitely. I think modules have cool things to take from them as well. That's where the whole in the campaign I'm preparing to do. That's where I got the idea from doing a one shot before the campaign starts, where it leads to the mission that starts the campaign. I'm sure there's a module out there that someone told me about that does the same thing, where it starts with a one shot and something big happens with the one shot, and then next session you use your campaign characters to go investigate it, and that's like the mission. There's cool stuff to pull from modules, because it's literally it's written by people who do it as a job to make things. So there's definitely cool things to get out of modules.
And I don't discredit like modules by that, because it's like writing a module for sale, for instance, is a really hard job. Like if you're homebrewing and your players have already given characters and backstories, you have so much to start building off of, right? And it's so easy to combine that. But when you're making a module, like literally anybody can play this with any character, like that's hard to do. You can't make it that well-rounded.
Yeah. And you've got to make it readable for other people, not just yourself, which is something that I have to think about a lot. Because I'll write in shorthand, I know what that means, that's fine. And then I send it to you guys, and I'm like,
it's not helpful at all.
Not particularly clear for you guys to read.
Yeah, I have two separate documents. One is everything I've written that makes sense in my head, and the other is this is what you lot are going to read and understand, because you lot are going to get a clue the way my thoughts are working.
Yeah, I think a lot of like DMs and creative types like have the ADHD gene in them. So like it's this, I have like carried this notebook around with me everywhere just for when idea strikes, because I can't do it on my phone. My phone's too distracting. And then like if I were to give you that right now, you'd be like some insane person. This belongs to an insane person. Nothing here makes sense. It's just scratches and notes and words like barely written on the side of other documents, and it's a mess. It's a mess in there, but it makes sense to me.
Yeah. No, but I just, when I have an idea, it usually comes to me in my sleep as well. I'll wake up and be like, this would be cool. Write it all down, and then might forget about it, and then come back to it later. Yeah, that's tends to be how it goes. So have you been more of a DM throughout like your D&D career, I guess, than a player, or has it been quite balanced?
What was that?
Like being, have you been more of a DM than a player throughout your career, or has it been very like a balance?
Definitely more of a DM. I do enjoy playing whenever I get the chance, but you know, I have that forever DM gene. The DM's always in need, so like, and I enjoy doing it, so I definitely don't mind taking that seat when there's so many people who are still trying to get into the game and learn. But I do regularly encourage my players to, if like they're interested in DM, I'm like, do it. Ask me any questions. I will be the like, quiet cleric in the back to support that role. And you have any rules questions, I'll just answer it. But whatever. I enjoy watching other people go from player to DM. I enjoy watching that jump in other people because it's cool.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely experiencing that with you now, Alex, and being like watching, especially with that one shot you were running. I was like, I'm enjoying it. It was really fun.
Yeah,
watching you take.
It's been an interesting leap. I don't think I'd ever fully commit to making such a world over this long of a period. But yeah, I do. It is very enjoyable preparing the world for DM. So I'm excited to start DMing at some point. Whenever we get the chance.
I'll get on my soapbox a little bit, and I'll even go as far as saying I think that is a lot of current dungeon masters' responsibility is to encourage other people to pick up the DM mantle, because I think that's what will continue to get this hobby adopted. And there's a lot of people worried about like AI taking over the DM role, and like that's only going to happen if you don't encourage your players to also start taking the DM role.
Definitely, and I think a lot of people now are saying that they've watched every episode of Critical Role, every episode of Dimension 20, all of these shows, and they're like, I've never played, I don't think I can DM. You can definitely DM if you've watched everything that's out there. 100% you can DM. You probably know the rules better than most players because you've consumed so much content by now.
I was watching Critical Role like season 2. I was in the middle of it, and I was starting to like realize that like Matt Mercer's amazing, of course, but like I realized I think I know the rules better than some of those players because they don't DM often. So like a lot of those rules, like as a barbarian, you don't need to remember all the spellcasting rules and stuff. So it's like if you've watched all of that and you've like got to experience what all of those characters have gone through and the different things Matt has put them through or Brennan has put them through, like you 100% have more than enough to like stumble through your first one shot,
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. Yeah. So obviously you've been a DM more, but 7 years is a while to play D&D. So favorite class and subclass.
Favorite class and subclass. Favorite class, 100% is Paladin. I love Paladin. I'm a sucker for the knight in shining armor. It's the role I like to play. I like how you can be very melee heavy. You can be very support heavy. And I think over the additions too, like the way they've like changed Paladin to not be so religious based, it really is just like you believe in something so hard that it produces magic, like that's dope. It's very like Green Lantern of them.
Yeah.
And I like that aspect a lot for sure. And like smite stacking and all that stuff. You can do some pretty fun, crazy stuff with Paladin for sure.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, I think it's a good class if you want to like power game. It's also a good class if you want to like lean into the RP of it too. Subclasses, man, there's so many of them. I think more than like a very effective subclass, I like a subclass that has like a really good theme. So I think like right off the bat, off the top of my head is like the armor for artificers. It was like they knew what they were doing. They were like, someone wants to play Iron Man at your table, so we'll just give you that. We'll give you Iron Man, plain and simple, and just not call it that. But like that's exactly what it is, and I just love that. It's such a theme, and I dig it a lot.
Yeah, actually, I agree. I do like theme subclasses. My first character was a Dragonborn monk with Way of the Ancestral Dragon. So it's just a dragon with dragon stuff. I love that so much. Yeah, it's fun. It is really fun. I do agree with the theme subclasses as opposed to the like.
I love that so much because it's like technically, if you want to be like rules or like feats, like it contradicts itself. Like the Dragonborn already has a breath weapon, and you gain breath weapon like abilities as monk, but it themes so well. Just like do it because it's fun, and I love that. That's so great.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great because you get wings as well. You get the wings at like level 7 or whatever it is when you step of the wind. So straight up, you could just basically become a small dragon. Like by that point,
turning from
you could just become a small dragon.
Boss, No, I love that.
Definitely, yeah. No, I do agree with the theme stuff.
definitely becoming more common with people shifting away from the more optimized classes to sort of builds that they
Yes.
know are not optimal in terms of like mechanics,
Yes.
but they're just fun to do because the
So
roleplay aspect of it is
what you're
just so much
explaining right
fun.
now, I've actually like broken down into stages of players. There's 3 stages of players. And like the first stage is like the person who's like, I want to play D&D because I've seen it on the internet. I have no idea what I'm doing. Those are the most fun because they don't know the rules. So they'll try anything. And if you're a DM who
Yes,
takes that, you're like,
absolutely. Yes.
you want to like topple that statue over the crowd of goblins? Like roll a strength check, and then it works, and they lose their mind, and they become obsessed with the game at that point. And then like you get the second phase once they become obsessed. They're like, this was so much fun. I'm gonna be the best at this game. I'm gonna have the optimized character. I'm gonna have the paladin warlock hybrid smited in. And then they realize that like, oh, being OP at this game, this isn't always fun. So I will use stage 3 player is the person who's like, I'm going to use all my like very metagame knowledge plus remembering all the crazy stuff I did when I started and merge that together. And that's when you get like the most unique characters and crazy outcomes. And then also like those are the players who really benefit at your table, especially with newer players. So that's that. I'm watching that journey, and some of my players have been really cool.
That's very true. I think my favorite personal character that I played was a bugbear paladin barbarian, raised by like an order of knights, but like had that primal energy inside of him, and just at some point just throw down his weapons. Like, okay, I'm going ham now.
It's the 10-foot reach
So
for
much
no
fun
reason.
to play.
Yeah,
which is horrific. I think
Yeah.
we were in some kobold den, and there's a small hole for small creatures. I was like, I can fit in there, and the DM's like, no, you can't. You're like 8 feet tall. I'm like, I can. And then we were like, how does that even work? Like biologically, how are you folding this like huge creature into the space for small creature, which is horrific, but so much fun to play.
Oh man.
Yeah. No, I do love the transition. I'm still like level 2 player at the moment. You know, I'll get to the metagaming at some point. But yeah, no, I mean, more time than not, I spend time sat there just creating characters for fun. Like I have a lot just sat there created. I won't use them all. There's a highly unlikely chance I'll touch most of the characters I made, but they're just there. They're good to have, you know, I mean, just in case.
Me, like again, I don't get to play a lot, so I'll make characters. Yeah. I have an interesting idea for a cool build, and then if a long enough time horizon happens, I don't get to play. I'm like, cool, that just becomes a dope NPC, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So you homebrew a lot. Do you homebrew a lot of subclasses and classes and races and stuff, or is it just mostly
I do
like
a lot
stories?
of monsters. I've played around with some subclasses. I like to adopt new players to my games, so I don't like confusing them with like, you know, very complicated subclasses, but for some players who are like, hey, I've been playing this for a while, I'm kind of bored, I'm like, I have this subclass idea, you want to play with that? And it kind of adds like a more in-depth mechanic. Or usually magic items. I think that's a great way to like, instead of coming up with a whole new subclass, you're like, oh, you want a new mechanic to play with? Here's a sword that if you hit 3 different enemies with, like, it unlocks this new ability. So it kind of unlocks miniature goals within the combat other than just trying to win. That's really more satisfying to the advanced players, while the beginner players can still figure out, like, what's the difference between an action and a bonus action and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think items are a great way to sort of get used to homebrewing and sort of get more into it. So beginning DMs, if you're looking at homebrewing, items are a great way because you very quickly find out if it's overpowered or not, and you're not like 10 levels deep in a subclass and you go, oh no.
Yeah, and then like I made a mistake. If I make something and I'm like, I don't know if this is balanced, or if you're not comfortable with like balancing weapons like that, just give that to players with the knowledge of like, hey, if this destroys my game, I'm gonna pull it back a little bit, or like, and that's okay, you know, like if it's for their benefit and their fun, like they're most likely gonna understand.
So for people who are sort of just getting used to like homebrewing items, what would be your main like advice, tips, tricks, sort of thing that you've learned So trial and error.
I would say, because I
to sort of
think
get them
the
going.
hesitation for homebrewing items and abilities and stuff like that is like, I don't want to overpower this character and then like they don't have any challenging encounters. First of all, like, don't worry about your encounters being too easy. Like, I've noticed that if I like balance an encounter or a mechanic and they just wipe the floor with it, I'm more upset about it than my players are. My players are usually pretty stoked at the fact they just like destroyed this thing I designed to be kind of difficult. So one, don't worry about that. Two, I think adding a thematical recharge to your weapons or abilities. So like, in my opinion, I think Wizards of the Coast gets a little lazy with some of their items, and it's just like, hey, you can do this as amount of times as your proficiency bonuses per day, or once per day, or whatever. And instead, make it something a little more thematical and fun, like, you have this one huge ability on this katana, right? And then once you use it, you can't use it again till, like, it's blessed by a dragon priest from Tiamat or whatever. So then, as you being the DM who controls the world, you can control how often that recharge event happens. Like, you control how often they can meet a dragon priest of Tiamat, you know? So if it's overpowered, you're like, okay, you only know one, he's going to charge you a lot to recharge it. Or if it's not that strong, you're like, you have a dragon priest in your hideout who just waits for you, you know? Yeah.
That's very
Yeah, so
cool.
if you're
I really
unsure
like
if it's
that.
like too
That's a really good
powerful,
idea.
just like make the recharge mechanic thematical, and then you can adjust that in your world when it doesn't feel like you're constantly adjusting the weapon itself or item, whatever.
And that's also like 100
Mhm.
times more satisfying to the players. That's so much more enjoyable to do than just,
Right,
I'm
exactly.
going to take a long rest and I can do this
it
again.
ends up being a tool for you as a DM too. Like, if you have that player who cares more about combat than the story element you're currently on, be like, hey, you know, you can only recharge this with the Tiamat priest. This Tiamat priest you heard is in the next town. You go find them, recharges your sword. It also turns out they have key information that progresses your main story plot, you know, so that you can almost interweave what they want mechanically with what you want thematically.
Yeah. So let's jump. I think this takes us nicely into our first sort of section, which is commonly homebrewed rules that people have that I guess have sort of become, in people's minds,
Or there's
raw
lots of
rules
those.
rather than homebrewed rules. And one I've seen quite commonly used is changing inspiration from a advantage roll
Oh,
to a free
wow.
nat
I don't think
20.
I've heard of that one. I've never used it. I haven't heard of it. I think it could be a lot of fun. I think like a free nat 20 definitely is like,
Yeah.
come on, hold on. Like, it's a lot, right? And I think it really determines on like what you again, there's a million different rules for nat 20s at like that change from table to table. So like if it's like critical wise, like critical damage, sure. I think because then in that point, one, you've made inspiration more valuable, and one of the biggest problems, in my opinion, is like players forget they have it. And then again, it's one of the things that you as the DM control. The only problem is when you like, yeah, I gave you inspiration at the beginning of the game. You know, 1 year of real time later, I just remembered you had it for this epic roll. You know.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think that's fun. I don't hate it. Like, obviously that can come and bite you in the butt later, but I think I enjoy getting bit in the butt sometimes. Like yeah, exactly.
Keeps me on my toes, keeps me thinking.
Yeah, so I'm down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. No, I agree. I think it could definitely add to the like the roleplay element as well. Like, for instance,
Right.
Of course you agree. You're a player.
Yeah, of course. But like,
Yeah, I love that.
yeah, but like, if please give me the natural 20. Yeah, but for instance, it could be you could have just monologued. You could have just had a moment, and then you roll your dice, and then you get like a 1, and it's awful, and then it just ruins the moment. But then if you've got a 3 natural 20, you just go, yeah, this slaps. This goes really well. Though I know people do have their own like rules for if something cool is going to happen and you want it, just don't roll. We'll give it to you. But I think at 3 that's 20.
Right, because I think you put that in your players' hands a bit more
than
just like, oh, it's your moment. I'm just going to let it work. You were like, no, I want it to work. I think even something that to be a little interesting to like tack onto that is like only allow. So if you gave someone inspiration, be like, cool, this is a free nat 20. You're not allowed to use it for yourself. Like you can only use it for a different player, because then it adds that access of interaction between your players a little bit, and then it becomes like a bonding moment. You're like, I'm gonna give my spiritual. You can even make it thematic, like it's like a note of inspiration inside of you that you can deliver to someone else, and like then you get to pick the key moment that someone else might be very distraught of rolling their nat 1. You're like, know what? I'm giving you my thing. It's a nat 20. And then like that could lead to good RP, or just like really, especially like when you're adding new players to your table and like those players might not know each other personally. It's a great way to like bond in character, because those bonds, become real, as we all know.
That's taken the idea to another. That's really good. Yeah,
definitely.
That's definitely improved that.
Yeah, a lot better than advantage, because the thing is advantage as well.
Yeah.
It can just still be bad.
Yep.
You can still roll
like,
bad
cool,
twice.
I just had that the other day. I definitely. I have inspiration for this really cool. I was like, roll initiative, and she was like, wait, I have this fact, and I was like, oh, that's a good point. Roll deception, nat 1, and I was like, you have inspiration. I always try to remind them they have inspiration. They're like, bet. Nat 2. I'm like, well, all right, roll initiative. It doesn't always feel as satisfying to use your inspiration, which is probably why some people forget that they have it.
Yeah, definitely.
So, do you have any sort of homebrew rules that you've been using for so long that they're just naturally part of your games now?
I have several, and then I'll kind of like interweave them depending on like what classes my players are, or like what they find enjoyable. I think one that I know a lot of people are going to have problems with is rolling for hit points. I hate rolling for hit points, and like, but like I also understand that it's also not satisfying just taking the average. So like I let my players roll, and then if they don't at least get the average, I give them the average, because rolling a 1 sucks. If you're like, okay, let's re-roll nat 1s like Matt Mercer, then rolling a 2 sucks. Like, and yeah, it's like the thing is like I'm gonna control the monsters you fight. So like, if you guys have more health than the average player, I'll compensate for that later. That's my job. But like, I want your level ups to feel as powerful as they are.
Yeah. I think I think it also comes down to people who are quite hard on rolling like abilities at the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
Some people can be real sort of sticklers about that, and it's kind of like, because you can get all under 10, and if someone's like, that's just not fun. I don't like, because nobody. Yeah, I don't like my players feeling like they're just kind of like, because you can have someone have like full 20s.
Right.
It's unlikely, but they could do it. And you got someone with all under 10s, not a single plus in this one.
I think really that is probably my other most. I think so. When you're going back to my most used homebrew rules, I come up with a standard array. Like I make my own standard array, which is a little better than what's in 5th edition, and I'm just like, go ham. Like if you want to pick the optimal race to go with your 16 I'm giving you to start with a +4, go for it. Like I don't like. Especially playing Baldur's Gate, I think I noticed it the most with like the point buy system being like more used, and I think that doesn't feel good either. Like I have a build in mind, but like if I had that 1 extra point, this build would be perfect. Like I want people to get that satisfaction of actually making the build work. So.
Yeah, no, I feel like if you're making a character, let's say you're making a character who's a fighter and their backstory is they're a failed knight. I feel like if they're a failed knight, they deserve that 20 in strength. I mean, they've trained. Like just roleplay wise, it makes sense. I definitely agree with that. Do you use crit fumble tables and crit hit tables at all?
Yeah,
or do you just think of it on the fly when they crit fail?
No, I don't use tables. I usually come up with it on the fly, because I think you need to. Every situation's that different. So like. Borrowing from other game systems is huge, and I borrow a lot from Blades in the Dark. I feel like if D&D wasn't as popular, I would only be playing Blades in the Dark, because it's such a good system, especially for storytelling. And I think Blades of the Dark really emphasizes like degrees of failure. So like if someone rolls a nat 1 on an attack roll, you just missed, right? Whatever. If you roll a nat 1 on picking a lock, but behind that door is the rest of your adventure, why would you make them fail that in an epic way? Like, there's different ways you could do that. So, like, the example I use all the time is, like, if you're picking a lock, the adventure is on the other side, be like, sweet, the door opens because a guard just opened on the other side, roll initiative. You know, like, that is your failed condition, not the fact that you failed at picking the lock, you know? You can add consequences without it just being a flat success or failure. It makes it more interesting that way, too.
I think that's also because I do something
Right.
similar. Everyone will run differently, but the people who have a disagreement with crit fails and crit successes in out of combat and ability scores, that's their biggest issue. It's like you could ruin your whole adventure by giving your player a critical success on a conversation with someone that's critical to the adventure, but you can change that. You control the degree of that critical success. If you don't want them to be completely agreeing, you can be like, okay, well, they agree with you, but like they're still wary of what's going on.
Yeah, 100%.
Your
and
choice.
Like, it could just be like, again, if you're having this like like you're trying to convince someone to help you in this with their army, like you're trying to get someone to lend you their army or whatever, and you just like, hey, can we use your army? Nat 20. That's not satisfying, you know, like, but like you can still reward that in different ways. Like if cool, like he's gonna listen to you now, and in fact, on the next good point you make, you'll roll that persuasion check with advantage, or you know, or just let them know like the next time you're talking to this guy about this topic, the DC is going to be lower. Like there's different ways to reward and punish based on nat 20s and nat 1s, not just like you did it, you didn't do it, because that is what will stop the momentum of your adventure for sure.
Yeah, and that's so much less satisfying for the player to just be like, oh, the army's working, it's fine, we win this, boom, done.
I don't want to attack classes. I feel like that is like a bard stereotype. I hit on anything, I roll a nat 20, it sleeps. You know, like it's just like that meme has established like I can convince anyone of anything with a nat 20, and I'm like that's not how that works. You know.
Yeah. They really enforced it in Baldur's Gate as well, because in Baldur's Gate, a natural 20 is just a critical success, straight up, like for everything. There's the place. I'm not going to try and say too much because you haven't played the whole thing, but there's the place with the vaults, and the DC is 99, and if you roll a 20, you just pass. It's like, okay, that's cool. Then just why bother making the DC a 99? Just make it like just outside the range of a 20 or something.
And not to like completely discredit that, because I think it can be fun. I think that's what makes D&T so volatile. Like no matter what you try, there's a 5% chance you're gonna nail it, and there's a 5% chance you're gonna ruin it. I was talking to my wife the other day, and I was like, you know what? D&D feels a lot like the Fast and the Furious movies, where it's just like, I'm just going to go for this. It doesn't make sense physically, but we're really good at rolling nat 20s. So, like, anytime they're trying to run a car with a volt and hit someone with that volt, they just rolled a nat 20 on that maneuver. And it's just like that party's really good at rolling nat 20s. And that's what makes those movies fun. So that's kind of what makes D&D fun, too.
I've never considered those movies.
Yeah, because it's like anything you do in D&D isn't realistic. Anything in movies isn't realistic. It just, you know, those are the times you roll nat 20s, or your DM's really good with inspiration or whatever.
Yeah. To be fair, that you brought it up and it makes sense. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. When you say it like that, it does make sense, definitely. So we tend to ask everyone, or most people who come on, who DM and who are players, favorite moment as a player and favorite moment as a DM, or worst moment, whatever works for you.
I'd say as a DM, ideally one of my favorite moments, and I think this is actually something that like most DMs don't like, but when your players completely outsmart you and ruin your encounter, it's one of my favorite things. Like I ran this adventure with like some of the original people I played with, and like I was just getting into homebrew and like feeling my way with game mechanics. So I had this whole adventure where like they were on a cart heading to this town. They get attacked by this like commander who's on a wyvern, and I homebrewed the shit out of that commander. He's got legendary actions. He's gonna ruin their day. They're flying down. He's attacking the cart. I have homebrew mechanics on like the bravery of their driver to see if they like ditch or not. And my warlock, she was like, I'm gonna cast suggestion. And I'm like, bet, whatever. Yeah, I have so many like legendary resistances. He's got good stats. She was like, no, I'm casting on the wyvern. And I'm like, oh, okay. And like the wyvern fails. She was like, cool. I want the wyvern to fly as far and as high as possible away from here. And it's like, I had to take a moment of like, I could say the wyvern doesn't understand you, right? Because it doesn't know languages. But it's trained, so that doesn't make sense. I could say it's all one stat block and he can use his legendary resistance to save it. And then like the energy from the rest of the players were like, hell yeah, that's awesome. And in that moment I was like, why would I take that away from them? So I let it happen because I didn't think of it, and it was extremely clever to me. So that wyvern just like effed off forever. Like it's an 8-hour long spell. So we flew as far and as high as possible for 8 hours, and it doesn't make sense that the captain would just like jump off of it at that point, you know? I think that was my favorite. Yeah, it's like whenever like I have this whole mechanic, I spent a lot of time on it. But the thing is, you didn't experience half of it, so I'll just use it again later.
I think we had a sort of a similar encounter where the party had split. 2 of them had remained in town, and 3 of them had gone. And I had a slug, and they're level 2.
Yeah.
So this is going to be like oh shit, this is going to be a kind of rough encounter. And Paladin was like, command, no, you don't. Compel duel. Took the damage, and the rest of you just pummeled it. And I was like, wow. This is, for me, I was like, this is going to be the gritty encounter. And they split up, and I was like, oh no, what's going to happen? and then it was like nothing. And I was like, damn.
Not only like was that like awesome, but like that's got to be so satisfying for your paladin, especially if they're like, I'm going to be the tank of the group. Like, they did it. They nailed that success of like, I tanked this and made this so easy. That's so cool. You got to love it.
Yeah. One of my favorite moments, I think.
It was like a top 3 moment in the campaign so far. It was definitely it was very 100%. Enjoyable. And do you have a favorite moment as like being a player?
Okay, it doesn't happen often, but I will say one of the guys I used to play with a lot. He's a fantastic DM. He does a podcast. Shout out to Fandom Encounters. Matt. He actually works for Disney World. He's like starting to work his way up to the Imagineer ladder, and so he's a freaking genius.
Oh wow!
And I didn't get to play as a player a lot. He was like, "Hey, on my next thing, I'm trying to do this pirate world. Do you mind like running in like a short adventure with me so we can kind of like I can kind of establish the world and figure it out?" And I was like, "Yeah, that'd be awesome." I'd never get to play the Artificer for the first time. And I didn't mean to give him like a crazy backstory. I was just like, hey, I'm a alchemist, the alchemist subclass. He's a rich guy, became a doctor, wife became a werewolf. I'm trying to figure out a cure for lycanthropy because in this world magic wasn't a thing. And so like we were going on this like adventure, and he had perfectly tied in like, so like I'm looking for ingredients, legendary ingredients or in magical information on like curing curses. And we were obviously doing something very different than that. But then he had perfectly lied in like a library. Like we had a fight in a library. And then in the library was books specifically based on ancient curses. And I just like didn't see it coming. And the fact that I was like, you perfectly tied in my like half-assed backstory to like, I can save my wife. Like I had an emotional moment where like I'm one step closer to saving my wife. And like I realized from that point on, I was like, that feels awesome as a player of like, you took something I made and you added it to your creative world. Like now I know the feeling I need to target in on my players and like making them feel like their story and like their ideas are perfectly woven into mine. So it seems natural and like it was always like that. And that was probably my biggest moment. I wasn't expecting it because it was like a trial run. But yeah, I think that was probably my favorite moment as a player, even though it was like mostly RP.
Yeah, no, genuine. My favorite moments as being a player is Simmer as well. When your backstory pops up in a campaign when you least expect it, it is
Yeah.
one of the best feelings as a player. Yeah, and the other day I saw a post in a D&D group chat, and it was someone looking for players for a campaign, and they were like, "Oh, the backstory is for you, not for the story in this campaign." I was like, "That's cool," but I was like, "I mean, yeah, you can do what you want; it's your world." But your players, I feel bad for they're not going to care about their backstory a lot because they're going to write a backstory and never see it in the story if you just said like that. And I was like, "Okay, you do you," but I'd hate for players to go through the effort of making a whole backstory and then never getting to experience any of it at all throughout the campaign.
That's a great example of how I think
sucky.
lone wolf players come about. Like that lone wolf player mentality. I think that's how that gets breed, because like
Yes.
if I want
I agree.
to like feel an adventure and I don't trust my DM to actually do anything with it, well, my whole lone wolf Batman, my parents died thing, like that can all be internal, even though it's going to affect my players negatively. But like I don't have to rely on my DM to fulfill that like self-loathing lone wolf feeling. I don't have to rely on anybody, because the whole idea is that you're a lone wolf. I think that's how that starts.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I think if you're asking people to make characters, you have a responsibility to have them tied to the world. You because they have to. The players have to exist within the world rather than the world exist for the players, which is what I see a lot of people doing. And it's. I mean, they're probably new DMs, and you get that sort of something you get more used to. But it's so more satisfying to have the players really care about something. Like you guys have a conspiracy chat for the
That is
campaign,
cool.
and that's, I think, one of my greatest accomplishments.
Yeah, I mean,
that you've got this. It feels so great to know that
we've got two now. Yeah, we've got multiple.
No,
we've got one for another player's backstory, and then one for the main story of the campaign. Yeah, we've got two chats now.
I think that is I think that is
but it
the
does
best
help
feeling for a DM, when like your players are talking about like, I think it's this behind your back. You're like, yes, I did it. They're all scared. That's so good.
I mean, I'm a lore gremlin myself. I have a plethora. I every week, in and out, I'm thinking about what is going to happen. The thing is, I don't take notes. I just think of it like permanently. Like 10% of my brain is working on the campaign, and I would love to give the same to players in the future. Which is why I'm doing for my campaign. It's going to be a pirate world one, but I'm getting the players to. It's going to be the same group that Iwan's running for, that I'm a player in. I'll be DMing for after the arc one. But I'm getting the players for their backstory to do their backstory, and then we can make a subclass based on your backstory, so it all perfectly ties together. And then I said, you guys can have any relation to any god if you want. I'm doing Greek gods. I was like, if you guys want to talk to gods, let me know. I will happily create a whole persona for you lot to message you during the game, to bother you about stuff, just to be whatever god you want me to be. Yeah. Because I prefer the players to be like fully. I think it'd be more interesting to be fully immersed, with their backstories as well, than the story of the world.
And like, to that extent, like I think that's awesome. And like, you're having a mixture can be difficult. Like if you have like that one player who's like, a lot of my tables are like, hey, my character used to be a gladiator, I think, and that's their backstory. And then my wizard's like, here's a 3-part essay on my backstory. Like I don't necessarily think a lot of them are wrong. And I think we see a lot of examples of people who are like, here's my character, I know everything about them, they're like this, they're going through these problems, blah, blah, blah. They hit the table and do that first adventure, completely different. Like completely different what you thought it was going to be. And like, so like when I get a lot of backstories, I'm like, cool, I'll read this. Thank you for putting in that effort, and I'll definitely go through it. But I'm not going to weave your backstory into the main story until we have some like room, so you can really discover who your character is, other than who you think they're gonna be. Because I've seen so many times where like the character you show me and the character that hits the table are two different characters.
We've experienced that, I think, in our campaign currently, and I've heard people say that they don't let players
Oh,
edit
wow.
backstories during the campaign. No, absolutely, because you and Michael have both sent me new drafts of your backstory like 6 months in, and I'm like, absolutely, keep editing it, keep adding to it, keep changing it, because you're gonna. Dan's opinion wanted to be a knight, now he wants to be a trader. It's changed.
It's
Things
straight
have
up
changed.
That's good. And
Absolutely,
I
it
think
all
that is
matters.
a good sign in general, because that shows trust.
I agree.
Like that means it's like I could just stick with my knight background, right? Just because you may or may not use it. But if I'm like constantly wanting to change it, it's because I trust my DM's going to do something interesting with that. And so a lot of the times when I get players who might have played before and they don't want to go too into deep story or too into backstory, it's because like I know they've been burned of like someone not like using their creativity as part of their game. So they don't want to waste the energy, or they're too hesitant, or they don't want it to be ignored. There's usually like, you get that a lot with people you've played with a lot. Like the more you play with someone, they're like, oh, I'm going to give you this. And there's a trust there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
when getting a backstory, I'm kind of I'm much for the bullet
too.
points. I don't want to. Wall of text is kind of off-putting sometimes. Give me just straight bullet points of like important aspects to your backstory. If you want to give me like a paragraph, that's cool. It's going to be tough to read because I'm already going through so much.
Yes, 100%. Bullet points are definitely my thing, because that's what I'm going to turn your backstory into anyways. I'm going to turn it into bullet points.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's extremely powerful.
Yeah, I agree. Bullet points. I like reading big documents full of words. I'm not going to lie. I lore dive documents. I said to everyone, if you don't want to write me like a 4-page backstory, I will read the whole thing, and I will remember it because I enjoy lore. So yeah, bullet points. I can say it's probably more convenient, but I do love a good old juicy document full of backstory. I just enjoy reading it.
In my opinion, I think the DMs who fight that are like, it tells you a lot about a DM, because like I could come up with like, I have ideas for whole giant campaigns with like, I want this to happen, and then they go here and they go there. But then it's like, if your players want something different, especially because of their backstory, like I want my players to have that more than I want to have it. Like I think it was a tweet I posted a while ago, but it was like, being a DM is like hosting a party where like you do a lot of work and you might plan activities, you might even spend money and food and stuff, but like it's a lot of work. But if everyone's having fun, then it's all worth it. And even if you've planned all these activities and then everyone ends up just playing Xbox all night, but everyone had a blast, dope. I'm glad the Xbox was there for that, And it's like, if you
100%.
feel like you're not like, because a lot of people will be like, well, it's about the DM's fun too. And I was like, if you've established a campaign that everyone at the table found something they had fun, and you didn't have fun doing that, I don't think DMing's for you,
100%. I fully agree with you. If you're watching people have fun in something you've created, that's enough for me. I'm enjoying that anyway. It's great watching you guys just run around and dig about in this funny little world I've built.
And you'll always have players who enjoy that more when they helped put, like, if you've developed a whole town based on someone's backstory, they're gonna love that town no matter what you did with it, because they kind of made it, and that's how it's collaborative storytelling.
Exactly, 100%.
I mean, you could even use your players from one campaign after that's finished to continue the world on, and they become like legends or whatever for the lore. Like, exactly.
That's fine, unless you kill them in that campaign and they don't come back to the Alex.
That was unintentional. Look, I didn't think that was gonna happen. Well, I kind of suspected it to happen. It was a one shot. It's fine. Your legend's in the lore. When I give you the lore, you'll see Forest Man's name. It's okay.
The next PC in the adventure is inspired by a statue dedicated to your sacrifice.
Fantastic.
I mean, I've even had in the one shot we ran for some world building for the world I'm doing. in my world, there's only 26 goblins. They're one family. So people don't fight
cool.
goblins. Goblins are nice in my world. They're
I love
nice
that.
people and they're respected. But as far as their names go, it's like Boblin and then like just the alphabet. That's why there's 26 in front. But we had one of the players in the one shot was like, "Can I play a goblin?" I was like, "Yeah, you can play a goblin. Give me a letter. Decide what his job is." And that goblin's going to be an NPC later on in the story, but you can play him now however you want him to be. Yeah, I think having players like help with the world building is genuinely the
100%. Yeah,
best
alphabet
part
goblins.
about it, yeah.
I love that. So good.
Yeah, and they're all going to have jobs related to what letter in the alphabet it is. So Moblin,
Nice.
merchant goblin. This specific player played Loblin because they lob a lot
it's
of
like
cannons.
a fantasy Men in Black
the,
organization
nice.
of goblins.
Yeah. Yeah, genuinely, it pretty much is at this point. I mean, I told them about Boblin in this world because Boblin the Goblin is like the basic NPC meme.
Boblin.
Boblin in this world is straight up just a demigod who you can summon by sacrificing a gold coin to buy things off of. That's just the existence of Boblin. Yeah. Right. I think that will lead us straight into our next segment, horror stories.
Oh man.
Yeah. This one seems interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. It seems relatively interesting. It's from a player's point of view, this one. Recently we've got some DM ones, but this one is player's point of view. The title is, I somehow became an NPC in a 2-person campaign. Yeah.
Oh.
Already not that great start.
Interesting.
Okay.
So, no. So me, Barbarian, and my friend Bardslinger have never played D&D before, but our other friend, the DM, had on several occasions. So we decided to start a campaign. Session 1 occurred, and it was great. We opened the campaign with my character participating in a drinking contest, while Bardslinger went around pickpocketing off of all the drunk people. All was going well, the dice were on my side, I was winning the drinking contest, Bardslinger was getting so much money, and then another player, they were only here for session 1 before scheduling, made them drop out. Opened a barrel outside the tavern, setting off a chain of explosions that was a catalyst to a goblin raid. Cool. Session 1 sounds good. We spend the rest of the session switching between fighting off goblins and running back to the temple to get supplies. All in all, it was really fun. And then the after party happened. During the after party, Barcelona's character, I think that means Bardslingers, acted like a stereotypical bard. No problem, it was funny at the time. But in doing so, we met an NPC named Miles. Miles was your run-of-the-mill, innocent, naive cleric who didn't even know what sex was. Bardslinger interacts with him once and is immediately like, he's too pure to be around me, and starts acting awkward. It's funny at first, but for some reason our DM latches onto this and is immediately set on finding more and more ways to get them stuck together. Because now it's subtly, not so subtly, his OTP. For the next 6 sessions, all social interactions and roleplay involves Miles in some capacity, even getting to a point where the story wouldn't progress unless he was there. It didn't affect Bardslinger all that much, because any chance that her character and Miles could interact was immediately going to happen. I, on the other hand, somehow got sidelined everywhere except combat. If we're in town and I want to participate in a drinking contest again, now it's duos and Miles is in there with me. Also, somehow with advantage since he had poison immunity. If I wanted to try and help an NPC, I got exactly 1 check to try before Miles came over and did it for me. And if I decided to branch off and do my own thing, like within the same building, I didn't split a party. I got to interact with an NPC for maybe 2 sentences before you'd get cut back to Bardslinger and Miles doing whatever they were doing. I did have almost no impact, to the point where the DM actually forgot NPCs I contacted with or were important to my backstory. Whereas he let us know he already had Bardslinger's whole story quest ready as soon as we finished our current mission. And yes, Miles was vital to it. This eventually fell through, mostly because of scheduling, but by the last session, I didn't even attempt to interact with anything outside of combat, and the story and everything involved remains entirely the same. By the end, I was only relevant during combat, but since they needed me to stay alive and to carry things, since I had the highest strength. TLDR, DM basically turns campaign into Bard Slinger's dating game, and I sit on the sidelines being combat packed mule. Yeah, that's the horror story. I feel very bad for this player.
Yeah,
Very,
but
very
one
bad.
quick question.
Yeah.
Anywhere in that, did they mention to the DM that they felt sidelined?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is the top comment is sorry that happened to you, but you've got to coordinate with the DM communication, which is a general rule with the horror stories here. Is there's a lack of communication always with a horror story because communication does solve things. However, DM should have known better. For a first time player as well to go through something like that, easily they could be put off playing D&D. Easily they could just be like, if D&D is going to be like this, I don't want to do it.
Yeah, there's a couple things there. I think so like I think we hear a lot about characters having main character like syndrome, and I think a lot of times DMs can accidentally facilitate that. And like even in newer DMs, like whenever you're playing, especially newer DMs with like a bunch of people, and you're really worried about like anyone participating, and there's one player who's like always engaging, like always like talking to the NPC, always doing this and that, you can accidentally start making the story about them because they're the one kind of engaging. This doesn't sound too much like that because it sounds like they said, like their whole story was planned out and they were just kind of there. I do think, again, like talking is, people don't want to have that awkward conversation, but like having one really awkward conversation to save you like 15 awkward sessions, I think is a good trade-off.
100%.
Yeah.
I think it also comes down to just being, they said DM and never DM before, so it definitely comes down to just like you said, leaning on a player that's engaging. And
I have like a general rule on romance is like, I don't touch that at all unless my players engage it. You know, like if they engage it with another player, I will separately make sure both players are cool with it. And if they engage it with an NPC, I'll play along. But like I've seen so many times. I've been a part of campaign. That's why I've never played Strahd. Like I was a part of Strahd. I have my own horror story with Strahd, and like I was a young elf. They tried to get me involved with like a mayor's wife, and it was a whole thing. And I was like, that's not that wasn't even my character's vibe. Like so, you know, whenever a DM initiates, like if it's like a drunk barmaid who's flirting with someone, that's fine as like a quick little encounter as long as it doesn't go too far. But like any kind of like romantic, physically or emotionally, like with an NPC or trying to force something between players, it can, in my opinion, it's gone wrong more than it's gone right, especially if it's facilitated by someone who, you know, isn't involved in it.
Yeah, we have the exact same rule, but it's just, if it's there, if it happens, it happens. No one's going to push it because this is a funny little fantasy world. Nobody wants to spend time doing that unless you want. Then if you do,
I have to say, I think the times I've seen it the most have been in like whenever I've been a part of a drop-in game. Like I've only done like, you know, come sit at the table at your comic shop to do this game, and then there's always some weird sexual thing, and I'm like, I'm good, thank you. I'll never come here again. I'm scarred for life. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no. So that's quite common. You see it. I think you see it quite a lot, especially in the online things. I mean, I sent you I took a screenshot the other day and put it in. Was it today or was it yesterday?
Yesterday, I think.
Someone had posted looking to start a fun D&D server, and then they'd also added at the end for part with like kinky conversations. And I was like, how does that work? Like at what point?
Yeah. It was in the D&D Facebook group chat for D&D UK Dungeons. It's a big group chat. There's a lot of people, and they went, anyone interested in D&D fantasy chat we're kink friendly, 18 plus, for geeks and nerds who like romance. And I was just like, no, don't put that in this chat. I'm sure there's another chat
Yeah,
out there that does
it's
that.
just one
but
of those
not
things
this
that if
one.
it has
Yeah.
to be said or mentioned, you're playing for the wrong reasons, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And I was just
the only time I've seen it work, like a romance thing,
it's
is
a
when
bit,
two players are like, "Hey, we're gonna build characters. They're going to fall in love. We will discover how that happens along the way." But it's like, I think the DM
Yeah.
should stay out of it.
yeah.
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 I
I think
definitely
it's
agree.
become a lot more popular. Sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just agreeing. Yeah. That's all.
It's become a lot more popular seeing these sort of actual players doing it. It's a critical
Yeah.
role, but they are actors. That's literally their job is to formulate some of this and stay within boundaries. And it's all. I think it's very difficult to do it because it can get out of hand real quick, and especially if people aren't used to that, and then it can
Yeah.
get entangled with real world things, and it's
Yeah.
A
better to
book.
just avoid it.
And
Yeah,
they know each
100%.
other
And that's the
well
thing
as
too.
well.
Like,
Yeah.
one, like
Yeah.
it works if like you've been best friends for 7 years and you're playing D&D together. If you're going in a drop-in game, don't start a relationship with anyone. You don't know anyone. That's weird,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's what your
Yeah.
character would do. That's weird.
Yeah. Yeah, and by the looks of the comments, luckily, the player seems to have started DMing their own campaign.
Hey.
So it's kind of a positive end to
Oh,
that. Yeah,
that's
and
great. Yeah.
that's pretty good. A lot of people suggested killing Miles. Yeah, I would have tried to kill
Oh
Miles.
man, that's a great way. If you don't want to
Yeah, that's
engage in
would-
that awkward conversation, just kill the NPC and they'll kick you out. And you're like, great, sorry, oops, whatever.
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah. That's one way of doing it.
yeah, just straight up kill off Miles. Yeah, cool. Is there any other things you tend to steer clear of in D&D that you don't want to bring to the campaign?
Evil characters. Like again, I play with a lot of first time players mixed in with some experienced players. And weirdly enough, I don't know, I wonder if you guys have the same feelings because it seems like you guys play with like new people regularly. The person who has the least D&D experience wants to play an evil character. Like second or first character in, I want to be
Yes.
and I'm like,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
you don't know what that means.
Yes.
And like you hopefully you either do or don't understand that the people you're going to interact with are not NPCs. And like there's going to be some weird feelings there. Any DM or player, I highly recommend the book called TTRPG Therapy. My wife is a therapist, so I'm very interested in kind of like how TTRPGs can influence like your mental health and stuff. And this book describes it really well, and how like some people either do or don't have the ability to separate their feelings from their characters. And if they don't, they have to understand it's a skill that you develop. Like you hear about like even in like games like World of Warcraft, when like things happen in games, like people can't separate like they're like, you're my friend, we're not having a conversation, I just I want to steal your stuff because my character has a problem, whatever. Like 9 times out of 10 people can't separate that. And I think too many people will lean on the fact that like, oh well, you should be able to separate that, and it's like that is a skill that you develop. It's a skill that actors have to spend a lot of time developing. I've been a professional performer for a little over a decade now, and it's just like whenever you are in a speaking role with someone, it has any kind of like serious dramatic in it, like conversations have to happen, and all those. It's not just someone you can play a game and be good at. And like whether you want to have those experiences or not, like you have to navigate that the right way. And whether someone should or shouldn't feel this because it happened in character, it didn't happen in character, like you can't decide if an action you or your character did upset someone. Like you can't decide that they should or shouldn't be upset by that. And if that's going to lead to people being upset, like it's going to be a better experience if you just don't do that. You can make another character who doesn't want to do these horrible things to your party and still have fun with the game.
Yeah, I think that's it's definitely a new player thing of because once you once you start playing the game and you realize you'll find your favorite NPC and you'll find your favorite town and you'll be like, oh well, I don't want to be an evil person in this, but because they're so friendly and it's like a
Yeah.
little gnome dude and he's like going about his day and you're
I
like,
mean, I
oh
think
well,
there's two different
damn.
people in this
Yeah.
world. And
Yeah.
it's like there's all those games that like were like, hey, here's a choice you get to make. Be Satan or Mother Teresa. And like whenever you've accidentally clicked like the really evil one, you're like, oh no, reload my save. And like and then there's the people who only pick that option, you know? Those are like the two different people in this world, and I think, you know, we're in such a weird time where D&D came before mainstream video games, but there are more people who have played mainstream video games than D&D, and so they are trained with video game mentality, and they don't understand how different it is when you're dealing with other people, and like half of the game can be emotions, and people who don't know how to regulate their own emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the best way for someone to realize the best like slap in the face is if you play with a player that is really experienced, and then you've made your like character and you're about to be really serious and evil, and then the second you speak to that player and they're really experienced, you're like, oh, okay, is this not serious? Are we not meant to be evil? It's like, no, you can do what you want. Don't have to make an evil character. It's definitely, you have to find a balance of having just like someone who's experienced there with you, and a new player, because then it's like they realize that there's everything. Not everything has to be like, oh, serious or evil or dark. It's
Right.
it's a role playing game.
And again, those
Do what
feelings
you
are
want,
hard
like,
to navigate and hard to
yeah.
realize your experience. And like, I don't know if you ever had like I've had like some player conflict, but it's in character. So I'm like, hey, I just want to pause. Are you okay? Are you guys all right? And they'll look at me. They were like, yeah, we're fine. We're in character. I'm like, okay, well, you know, that's a lot of energy coming from you're fine. So like, let's just like take a beat and like look at what's happening and why those things need to happen. I think the best way to play an evil character, and this came directly from an interview with Lou Wilson from D20, and it was like, if you want to play an evil character, it is your responsibility as the player to come up with a reason why you don't want to be evil towards your party. Like, in my opinion, I think there's way too much pressure on the DM. Yeah. You're like, hey, here's 5 different people with 5 different varieties of fun, and you have to facilitate all of them, even if they conflict. It's everyone's responsibility at the table to make sure everybody is comfortable. And if you think you're above that or it's not your job, then it's like you want to play for the wrong reasons and you're not there for everyone else's fun as well. Then why are you playing a multiplayer game? You know.
I think that's why the way I've seen a lot of people online and I've been added like this is like I message the DM, I want to play in your game, and I immediately get added to the chat. It's like, I don't like that. I think the way that I do things is I'll talk to 5, 6 different people. I'll post all the screenshots, every conversation in the group chat and be like, guys, who do you guys like the look of? Any message even you weird? Like, who vibes with you the most based on these messages? And then we decide like that. Because I've got to play with them, but you've also got to play with them. It's more, they have to play with them. It's not just me dealing with them. You have to interact with them like 24/7, where I am just sort of like
100%. I actually have a question for you, because like I don't really play with people I don't personally know, and it seems like you like jump on forums and you search for people on the internet. Like, what is your process of like someone you don't know personally, but you want to invite them, especially inviting them to a group of like your personal friends? Like, what is that process like for you to invite someone to your like personal game?
It's so I think the original group was I'd known Rosie like 10 years, online friends for years, so I know she's going to be fine, no problems. And then Emma was someone I didn't know. So I started off with those two and we built from there. And it was always kind of post a description of the campaign online, ask the person, give me a brief like rundown of what you're like, what you do, that kind of thing. Generally sometimes include ages, sometimes don't, because like over 18, because that's just comfortability of the group, that's what everyone's vibed with. Don't really care if they're like 40, 50, whatever, as long as you're like gonna be a chill play. You're not gonna, because we have some LGBTQ and stuff like that. If you're gonna be down with that, that's fine. Everyone is treated with respect at the table. If you're not gonna do that, you're gone immediately. And then it's just based on like vibe of the character, and like you can kind of like work out based on the description of their character what they're gonna be like as a player. And then this is generally trial by error. We've had people join, and then we've gone, you're not really fitting, and then it's the awkward conversation of, hi, sorry, like people have come to me with complaints, and it's kind of like, I've got to
that's
deal
gotta
with
be
this
rough.
now.
And you know, I just recently started playing with like it's not even that extent. It was like I'm playing with these 3 players. They want their roommate to join, and I'm still even defensive about that. Like I trust this girl's whose roommate she's with, and like I made them go out. We went out to an escape room, and we had ice cream afterwards. We hung out, we talked and stuff, and I was like, cool, we can try. You know, like I'm very defensive over like my players because you know there's a lot of trust there. You know, so like I think you know it is always like
100%.
you know protective dad moment of like, hey, what kind of energy you're gonna bring into this game that we all enjoy together. You know.
I feel the same, and I hate using it because it's like, it feels, because our group is predominantly female. When
Oh,
I
wow.
do feel protective of the players, I'm like, it feels bad because it's that kind of vibe, and I'm like, but it's not. It's like, it is difficult to sort of
Yeah.
emphasize how protective you feel of the party, because it's the vibe and how comfortable and how fun every session is. And like, is introducing this new person gonna
Yeah, and
disrupt
that's
that vibe
hard.
that I
And
love
like
so much?
again, like kudos to you. Like I don't think I've ever even done the whole like, hey, can my roommate join our current campaign? Like when they were like, hey, can our roommate join? I was like, cool, we're starting over. Like we're making new characters. We were like kind of like wrapping up like a short adventure anyways, but like I was like, I don't want because I also don't want the person coming in to feel alienated. But again, like I've met this person, I spent time with them a little bit, and I can't imagine bringing like strangers on the internet to like a predominantly female group. I just feel like there's so many things that could go wrong, and it seems like it has from time to time. Yeah.
It has a few times. It happens, and it's just that you just got to move on. I mean, Alex, you you do a lot, don't you? On the player side
On
of
the player
things.
side, I've joined a lot of servers and campaigns online.
Oh
I've
wow,
never played in
that's so
person,
interesting.
never, not once. I got into D&D online. I got into it was a Facebook group. I asked my uncle because he played D&D and he knew about it. I was like, cool. How do I get into it? And he said, there's a lot of online stuff. Check out this group chat, this Facebook group chat. And it was D&D UK, and I was looking for the first time. I saw a post, the first post I went to, because I didn't know anything about anything. So I was like, cool. First post, I messaged, and they were like, yeah, come to the server. It was a whole Discord server full of different. It wasn't just for one campaign; it was for multiple. It was just like basically just like, yeah, you can pick and choose your campaign and message them. Luckily, I lucked out. My first campaign, I got along with the DM very well, and he got along with me, and he was like, yeah, I'm going to introduce you to the other players. Cool, and it was great. But there have been messages in that server for campaigns where I've looked at them and I've just gone, I'm not going to like this. And then but because I'm active in that server, I will get a message from the DM, and it will be like, "Oh, you're active. Would you mind being in this campaign?" And I've had to reject them. I've had to be like, "No, I know I'm active in the server, but I can't. I don't think I would enjoy your campaign." And then there's been being a player when other strangers on the internet join the campaign, because I know, and this was especially for me, I was really nervous joining a camp. Like I was scared. I was like, okay, this could go horribly. I was really nervous. Luckily, the other player who was in the campaign was really nice and helped me in. So I like to make sure that I don't become like, when someone new joins, that I'm nice to them, and that I don't just like make things sucky. That I'm a nice person. I interact with their character, and I make sure they feel comfortable. Because if someone who's joined doesn't feel comfortable, they're not going to be a good like person to have around as well, because they're going to be uncomfortable. It's going to suck for them, and then it will eventually suck for us. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of accommodating to do as a player as well.
That's a huge
online
point. I
sessions, at
think
least.
it's really important. Like if you're going to run a game that has like a rotating seat or whatever, like the DM has to do so much. So like if you have that one character who's like, I'm comfortable with this game, comfortable with these people, I want to make you feel comfortable here. That helps not just the person coming in, but that helps the DM. And like, you know, you also like don't want that new person coming in and like they're only looking to the DM of like, is what I'm doing okay? Like having the players like, you know, someone there to really navigate your character's like involvement into the party and getting comfortable with everyone, both in character and out of character, is huge. So I think that's key. That makes a lot of sense. It's probably why you guys have had success with it. Is like you have that like player like, hey, you're with me, sit next to me. You know, like this is how we do things here. That's huge.
Yeah, my tactic is start with comedy relief. Like the first thing, they introduce their player. Start with comedy relief. Do something silly. They can calm down a bit, and then you can do whatever you guys want. But yeah, just start with comedy
giving that
relief.
player
It's
like
fine,
a moment.
works.
You know, like you know, having that one person who's like, hey, this is the new person. They're a rogue. Maybe they should look at the trap. You know, whatever. I think that's pretty big. Coming from another player, not just the DM.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something I've also saw in one I tried to join is they invited me to join, and it was in the middle of the campaign because I think they were a group of new players and they wanted a more experienced player to help them guide through. There were a new DM as well,
Sure.
running Lost Mine. So I'd run 2 or 3 times, so I kind of knew my way through. And I get that you're sometimes at a point where you can't introduce a new player immediately, but I sat there for 2.5 hours just waiting to be introduced. And I was kind of like, if you're doing this to a new player, I would have left. Like, that's horrible. So I try and introduce players as soon as possible, even if it's slightly clunky. You can do it in a funny way that makes it a moment, to make it interesting, to make it funny for that player that's introduced. I mean, I think I did someone on my Wednesday campaign. They literally, a portal opened above them. The guild had sent them a new, like, they'd lost a player. The guild had sent them like a replacement. They get dropped from the sky. Boom,
an
they're
insurance
there.
portal.
Have
Like,
fun.
here's your
Bye. See you
replacement.
later. Portal closes. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that dives into like the whole like how this always sounds ridiculous to say, but how realistic should your game be? Like, and bending that realism for the sake of convenience and like fun. There's a weird balance that has to happen. Like, right, you can't just do anything all the time. It needs to almost feel realistic, at least within the realm you're playing in. But like, I talk about it a lot with survival games. Of like, a survival game that's too realistic isn't fun because surviving in the woods by yourself isn't fun. Like, so like it mechanically it has to make sense. And like, even as a new DM, he could have put it on you being a more experienced player of like, hey, how do you show up in this room right now after they just finished this encounter or whatever, you know, like leaning on your player's creativity for that and making a moment out of it. It doesn't have to be a huge thing, especially when the real life people know this is a brand new person to our table. We can really just brush over the fact of how they got here, you know, like.
Yeah, I think that's. And I've definitely said it before, but one thing I do try and, I guess, people talk about the Brennan E. Mulligan effect, the Matt Mercer effect, but there is one thing that I think Brennan does amazingly that I do try and emulate as much as possible is his balance between the fun and light, and then have the serious undertones there. I think that's something he does incredibly, and that is definitely the vibe that I try and get with my games.
I think as
and that's, I think,
100%, and I think as like Brennan Lee Mulligan's gotten more popular, and like how like Critical Role I think really introduced to the world like how emotionally tied like everyone can be to a situation, and Brennan Lee Mulligan was like, yeah, totally, but also we can have fart jokes and it's just as cool. That's what D&D ends up being anyways, and it's like that's part of it now, you know, like it's part of it, and that brings people to be in a comfortable space to then maybe eventually get to that really deep connection with your characters and each other. But like Man, I think him and Abria, honestly, like I think really was like, oh, you can be an amazing DM,
Yeah.
but you don't have to be an amazing voice actor and storyteller. Like, you can make it fun with your skill sets, and it just kind of made DMing approachable. And I think both D20 and Critical Role has done a good job about being like, hey, look, other people can DM, anyone can do it. Look, you know, and I think that's huge. And people need to understand it, break that wall of people starting to DM.
Yeah, and I think I call it magpieing because it's just taking the fun bits that other DMs do, and I hate the term the Matt Mercer effect because it's making everyone a better DM. Because Bria, one thing she always says is, "How's your character feeling in this moment?" And that's something I've taken and I use a lot because it does, I guess, make you guys think, and it makes you vocalize what you guys are doing in that moment. And I think, Alex, you'll attest. I use it quite a lot
I think
now.
I have.
Yeah,
I'm saying it a lot.
yeah. Many times it might be nice.
Yeah, it's so powerful, and I think it's
Definitely.
important to ask because, again, I think I'm quoting one of my own videos. Like, and again, being a husband to a therapist, like people don't think of it enough, even if there's something there. Because, and I know people don't think of it enough because people don't ask themselves that enough. Like, how are you doing? You know, like, how am I doing right now? Like, no one asks themselves that.
Yeah.
So I know you're not asking yourself about your character, you know? And, like, just taking a moment and be like, oh, wow, I guess right now he would feel this and that because of this situation. And that can evolve into a whole new arc and really, like, build that connection between that player and that character just by asking him, like, hey, how you doing? You know? It's so powerful and so simple, and you know, people gloss over it a lot.
I think there are so many things we can take from these sort of professionals.
Yeah.
It's their job. You know, they're popular for a reason. You can take things from them without making it a
100%. And I
bad
think it's
thing.
just like again, D&D is such like you can play it in so many different ways, and I think internally that makes new people uncomfortable. There's too many options. So then I think that's why people cling on to like, oh, this is how Matt Mercer plays. This is the best way to play it. And then Brennan comes along and plays it a little differently, and Abria comes along and plays it a little differently, and they're like, oh, okay, we can play it in all these different ways. Like, I think one thing I got from D20 in general is like sharing the mechanics of the fight with your players. Especially when you're like coming up with new stuff all the time, like the Box of Doom is genius. Because it's like if I tell you to like roll an Arcana check now to see if you can manipulate this thing, and you're like, okay, I got a dirty 20. And you're like, that probably does it. And you're like, yeah, that does it. But like you have no way to know what I set that DC to. You know, like if I was like, oh, it's a 22, but then maybe I want it to be a 20, it kind of takes credibility away from the DM. But then if the DM's like, listen, this is DC 25. I'm going to tell you that right now. Decide.
Yep.
What you're going to do. And then it holds you, the DM, accountable, and then internally makes you better at coming up with a pass or fail. I think too many DMs are like, here's a skill check.
Yeah.
You're going to pass it because I don't know what to do if you fail it. So, like, holding yourself accountable by telling them the DC first, I think is a huge way to get yourself as a DM better at deciding what the pass and fail state is going to be on any skill check.
That's definitely something fun that I definitely need to start doing more of. I've done it a couple of times, but it's definitely something I need to start doing more of. And there was that one video that Matt did. I think it was when he was DMing for D20. He said during one of the adventuring academies, it was roll a deception and persuasion check, but don't tell me which. And I was like, huh. I have to start doing that because that's genius.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. I sold it immediately.
And that is the best thing about playing D&D. And like, it's also like I'm a performer at Universal Studios Orlando, and I'm also a trainer. So like when I train in new people to perform, I'm like, here's what I do. There's a lot of flexibility in our performance. So I'll be like, hey, do this, do that. And I was like, that was cool. Keep doing that. And also, I'm going to do that now. Thank you. You know, and I think that is also the benefit of you encouraging other people to DM. Like, you know, if your player starts DMing and you're like, here's what I normally do, and they do something completely different, you're like, oh shit, why didn't I even think of that? You know, like it just makes everyone better, and it's so good, and it just feels good because it makes you feel like you're becoming better. Abria did something in the recent thing, and it's so honest. Like I think Abria is one of my favorite DMs because of her brutal honesty. She's like, here, roll this check. Let me be clear.
Yes, right.
If you fail this will happen. And then it just like it adds those stakes. It makes player remember their abilities. Oh yeah, I have bless. Oh yeah, I have inspiration, and all those things players tend to forget. Like when you let them know ahead of time, this is going to be serious. What do you do? And then it makes your players become more creative, and then you can reward that creativity because they kind of have an idea what the stakes are. And it's this type of thing that seems so obvious, and then it's like, oh, why don't I do that? You know, it's great.
So Abria is definitely one of my favorite DMs, but I've definitely got a bone to pick with her currently because I'm a sort of animal behavior researcher, and I'm currently working on otters, so mustelids. And the one animal campaign you do is the Watership Down season with stoats, and I'm like, no,
that's
how dare you? This is my thing, and you're.
I can only imagine.
It's painful. I spend all day looking at otter videos, and then I see the
you just gotta lean in. You're like, yeah, they're doing this because magic. Magic's involved, so that's why it's different than reality.
Add it to my Ethergram magic.
Magic or science, whatever it is.
Well,
yeah.
Thank you very much for coming on. It's genuinely been amazing talking to you. I think I've learned a lot. Alex, I hope you've got some.
There are things I'm stealing.
There are things I'm stealing. This has been super fun. Thanks for having me. And, I'm always down to chat D&D for sure.
So, one final question. Do you have any sort of smaller creators? I know you mentioned your friend's podcast that you want to shout out.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt Forrest runs the Fandom Encounters show. It's on Twitch, I believe, every other Thursday. And then all those episodes also become podcasts on whatever you watch podcasts on. And in general, I'm on YouTube and TikTok as Encountersmith. And keep finding new people to engage with, and you can ask me anything. You guys are just like, hey, you want to talk? And I was like, oh, absolutely. Sometimes it just takes asking. Yeah.
Yeah, immediately.
Yeah,
so we'll be back next week with another creator, which we're very excited about. So, you can watch us on... we're on TikTok now as we're trying. We've had a little competition, which you'll have seen. To have who get the most views. Yeah, we're on Spotify, so give us that 5-star rating on there. It genuinely helps more than you guys think. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, bye.